The Flipped Classroom. Hello, my name is Miss Judy, and I'm your student's American History teacher. I'm entering my first year here at Ore City ISD, and for the 2012-2013 school year, I have many goals for my students and myself. My goals for myself are to structure my classroom where the students become actively engaged within the lesson itself. I want to ensure that all my students are not just solely in attendance in class, but are attentive and understanding in all the material. My goal is to ensure that all my students also have the opportunity to use their strongest learning style to maximize their own learning, in hopes learning something that they can actually hold on to and make relevant to their own lives. My goal for all my students is to become active participants within class each day in discussions and activities. I want them to be able to discover new ideas and discoveries that have happened in the past and relate them to today. And finally, I want them to work hard and be pushed, and however that might look. So how can I accomplish all of these goals that I've set? After the first few weeks of school, teaching my students, it soon became apparent that all my students had different learning styles, and it was going to be hard to try to accommodate all of my students in the traditional way of teaching. So I had to come up with some kind of answer, and after many weeks of research, I finally came to the idea became the flipped classroom. So what does a flipped classroom look like? The flipped classroom is a way to invert the traditional way classes were taught, where teachers would deliver instruction and information, also known as lecturing, something most of you as parents probably witness in your own history classes. And then teachers would send home assignments for the students to come back with the information that they probably had already forgotten or forgot to write down in their notes. However, with the flipped classroom, it turns the lecture part of my delivery and instruction into a format of a video outside of class, which then becomes a homework, leaving our classroom time available to put the knowledge into practice and recall, where the teacher is present, allowing for better clarification and better instruction. Here's a picture of kind of what the old style and the new style compared. As you look on the left, you see the picture of the traditional classroom, as the teacher is in front of the room giving instruction to the students sitting quietly or taking notes. As you can see, there is no interaction taking place. Then on the right side, you see an example of the flipped classroom, where the students are working collaboratively in groups and the teacher is available to give more one-on-one help to those students who need it. This opens up the door for discussion, debating, or collaborative group assignments, making classroom time more effective in aiding the students better to retain the information, and the teacher one-on-one time to clarify for those struggling learners, reaching all of my kids in one time. So why am I choosing to flip my classroom? In the beginning of the school year, it became very apparent, as I said, that all of my students had different learning styles. Yet I want to make sure that whatever didn't work for some worked for others. I found out very soon that I was teaching to a middle group of kids, and that my discussion lectures were not higher level ways of thinking, and that most of the time I would only reach a small group of students. My higher level students were not being challenged enough and often already knew the material I was teaching, yet my struggling students were not receiving that effective remediation and often became lost in the shuffle during a discussion. In all, I was not mastering myself effectively as a teacher. I was not using my time with my students in the class, but solely sitting in the front of the class, throwing out instruction, expecting them to understand it. I have found out that 90% approximately of my class time is spent on the delivery and review of the content itself, which was leaving only about 10% of class time spent on the application, which was leaving my students the responsibility to complete the application outside of class, and only based off the small fraction that they actually retained in class, concluding that there was not enough time for differentiation or discussion within my class. So much time has been spent on feeding them the material that they weren't retaining enough or applying it to make it relevant. Leading us back to my new idea of the flipped classroom. By flipping my classroom, it is allowing my students many different ways to watch the video. They can pause to aid in extra note-taking, rewind for those who might need to listen a few more times to ensure that clarification and clear any misconceptions. They can rewatch the video as many times as they want. They will have access it all year long to review it before test or at the end of the year to have clarification over specific subjects. Or they can fast forward for those of my students who are higher achievers who can understand or already know the material that I'm trying to teach. They can then click on the added video and understand more information about the content. I'm allowing my students to make the lesson that they need. Make it their own. This is also a way for parents to become more involved in their child's learning. As well, parents, you are more than welcome to watch the videos with your students, helping them grasp material at their own pace. Each video will be about 15 to 20 minutes long and can last as long as you need it, or as short as you need it. So what will this look like in my American history classroom? It will basically be first a mixture of both online instruction and outside classroom instruction. At first, students will be asked to complete their history homework 2 to 3 nights a week by watching my discussion online and, if needed, the extra information video, where they will watch the small video clip and then take notes using the Cornell note-taking strategy. Here is an example of the Cornell note-taking system that I will implement in my classroom. On the far left side of the column, you see Q column. This is where they will write out their key points and their 3 questions that they will then bring to class to aid in discussion. On the right side, you see there's a note-taking area. This is where they will be asked to use their notes based off of the video. And on the bottom, you see that there is an area for summary. Each student will be asked to write a 2-sentence minimum summary of the discussed video. By implementing this kind of strategy into my students, I'm quickly teaching them the great strategy of note-taking and how to make it effective to carry on throughout their schooling. So now let me answer the question, why, or what is the purpose? To answer this, first let me remind you that no longer are our students being tested on basic knowledge of history, but now they're taking the EOC, which will have them understand it, and they will have to think critically and over the material far more deep than ever before. So if the test is changing, I felt that my classroom must as well. By having my students gain all the basic knowledge of the history content, it is freeing up time for my students to learn and gain much greater insight into the content and apply it in many different forms. This is not only helping them by learning to put into action what they learned, but allowing me to teach to all different learning styles. We in the class will now be able to construct in-class debates based off of information through the videos, go into higher level thinking questions that the students bring to class themselves, make them the center of the class, or construct class projects that allow for them to become more engaged on the topic and grasp a better understanding, or have them explain things and how they see history through their own writings, or allow for bookwork, where students will take their knowledge and apply it to relevant questions out of the book. In all, I want all of my students to be challenged according to their specific learning style. And by doing this, I'm allowing each of my students to master their own image of learning. After the video, each of my students will come to class and we will talk with other classmates. And this will then turn my classroom into 90% being put on the application of the material and 10% on the delivery of the content. My class is now flipped. More time is being spent digging deep into the history content itself and relating it to today and other important series of parts in history, and see how history truly comes together. And now only 10% of my class will be spent simply on giving them the material. The results. In the end, all of my students now will become challenged at their specific speed level. They become the center, and I become simply the facilitator. I have time to spend more one-on-one with those who need it, and allow others to dig further into the material or help out their own classmates and collaboratively discover history as it changes itself. So, the challenge has become to challenge in reaching all of my students to help them create and achieve their own potential. So now the question comes to, what if my child doesn't have internet access? During the early stages of researching for the flipped classroom for my classroom, I polled all of my students. I found out that yes, most of them have internet access. However, there are a small group that do not. And for those students, I have talked to the school, and we are now going to issue reroutable DVDs or USB drives. The students will be issued the DVD or USB drive at the beginning of each unit before the homework will be issued, and they will then go home, watch their DVD or USB drive on any device available. They will then have material until the next unit, where they will bring it to class, and I will reburn on that same DVD or USB drive the next set of material. As well, they are always welcome to watch the video in the library or the computer lab. But I want no student to be left behind. I want to ensure that all my students have the same exact opportunity to reach this kind of learning. To learn more or ask questions, please feel free to contact me, Jordan Udy, at udj@ocisd.net.